We were in this room last year and we were asked to put down on paper, on the board first, what we thought was the real challenge, what was going to make our organisation better, or something that had been niggling inside of us. And you'll all know what that is. You'll all have it now. You'll all be hearing these inspirational speakers today and you'll be all thinking, just need that to happen. So it was niggling, and we wrote it down on the board, and then we had to say it out loud in front of each other. And there's nothing like committing to something like that when you say it out loud and you have an audience that has heard it, and then you're asked to come back and tell people in a year what you did. So it had to happen. And I'd been inspired, I'd heard all these amazing speakers, and I stood up in front of everyone and I said, I am going to change the culture of my organisation. Admittedly, I might have got a little bit carried away in the moment, but I knew what I needed to do. And then I went away and thought about, right, how am I going to do this? And I'd been doing something wrong. And that was how I was going to change the culture in my organisation, my wonderful organisation being Birmingham Children's Hospital. I had believed that my fundraising team, that's me by the way, I thought the cape might be too much today, but I'd believed that my fundraising team was merely 24 energetic fundraisers, some finance officers and a really good supporter care team. And that's what I've been doing wrong. My actual fundraising team, the true potential of the fundraising team, was 3,300 staff at Birmingham Children's Hospital and over 250,000 visitors to the hospital every year. So I knew that it had to be me. I knew why it had to happen, and I was determined to make it happen. But naturally, and I did have a moment where I thought I could stand at the front of the hospital every single day and tell people they should be in my team and they should be telling people why they should fundraise and wouldn't it be great and aren't these all the benefits. But I thought after a while that might become slightly intimidating and it probably wouldn't be long before security removed me. So I had to think about it. This wasn't going to just happen. I was going to have to be patient. I was going to have to be clever about it. And I needed to think about, whilst I was getting this started, who were all the other who's that were going to actually make it truly happen? And it was going to be a few nudges along the way. There was going to be moments of influence. But ultimately, I just needed to get everyone just that little bit more involved. So I sat back and I thought about who are all the who's. Who in the organisation has the most connectivity? And the first one was pretty obvious, and that was going to be our Chief Officer of Nursing. She had the largest workforce. It was very obvious the benefits that fundraising would have for the organisation. It was tangible, you could see it. And a lot of her workforce, the nurses, naturally cared so much for the patients and families they were looking after. They wanted to be part of the stories we were trying to tell. So that one was a little bit more obvious. But trying to tell a hospital that fundraising is an integral part of its day-to-day and should be part of its core business was going to be a little bit trickier with the rest of the board. So one of the challenges I knew I had was with our Director of Estates. And why would he think that fundraising was something he should be a champion of, especially when fundraising to estates in general was seen as the radicals, we were seen as the rebels, we were the ones that didn't care for health and safety, we didn't really care for infection control, and so on. So we were the ones that always broke the rules, and were always the ones that estates were coming to find afterwards. So why was the Director of Estates going to help be a champion for fundraising? And then an opportunity came along. I'd noticed that there'd been a problem with estates recruiting. They were struggling people to get into trades such as electricians and so on. And at the time, we were working with many higher education colleges and universities, and they were looking for work experience. They were looking for new ideas. We were looking actually from a fundraising point of view for how we could develop and make those partnerships longer term and get the partners also embedded within the organisation. So from knowing what the problem estates had, I then went and approached our Director of Workforce and said, we can do something about this. Why don't we create an apprenticeship and internship programme? And things just started to happen. Naturally, we were happy that we could have partners that were finding a new way in. We had a fantastic apprenticeship and internship programme. That helped the hospital say that we were being advocates of children and young people in more ways than one. And estates were happy because they were getting a new recruitment drive. And in that moment, things just started to happen. Fundraising started to be seen as the people that could help solve problems and help connect people. And from our point of view, we became engaged and embedded in every way. So you probably all know, as I say, what that thing is that really needs to change, and think big and think bold and make a note of it and commit to it. But then think about who are all the other who's that you need to make that happen.
So I know that we're the only thing that's really separating you from lunch. So we've got to be inspiring and really grab your attention. So as you've gathered by now, Louise and I are here to talk about how we make all this theory that we've been hearing this morning really put into practice. We're talking about how you make something happen. So I'm going to start by telling you about somebody else who made something happen, who is the woman in the picture called Helen. And she's actually not based very far away from Birmingham Children's Hospital, because she is the salon director in Francesco's hair group, which is based in Stone in Staffordshire. And Helen is a very special person because she cares deeply about a charity that's based near her hair salon. She cares deeply about a hospice, and it's called Catherine's House Hospice. And she and her salon, her not that big hair salon, have supported this hospice for 10 years. They support them by sponsoring the ladies' luncheon that happens at the hospice every year. And that's one of the great first things about this partnership between this company and this charity, is that it's a really good fit, because the people that go to this ladies' luncheon are absolutely the target customers for this hair salon. But also, Helen cares deeply about this cause that she's supporting. Now, they've supported them for 10 years, and through this ladies' luncheon, they've raised over £100,000. But that isn't enough for this small hair salon in Staffordshire. They've gone further than that, and they persuaded the whole of Francesco's hair group to adopt this hospice to be their charity of the year, which raised a further £100,000. Can you imagine the impact that that funding is having on the lives and the families of people that are in that hospice? Because of one woman started something in a hair salon in Staffordshire. But they go further than that, and I think this is the thing that really stands out to me to be remarkable, is once a month they go to this place pictured in the picture here. Inside the hospice, they have funded and built a hair salon where Helen and her colleagues go every month, and for free they cut the hair of the patients of the hospice. They cut the hair of the patients of the hospice because they know that actually when we have a haircut, it really makes us feel, especially if only if it's a good one though, I guess, when we have a haircut, it makes us feel great about ourselves. And actually feeling great about ourselves is a really important part of personal well-being. And they believe that even though you might be sick, you might have cancer, you might have dementia, you might be terminally ill, and sickest of sick in this hospital, you still deserve to feel great about yourselves. And her colleagues go into this hospice once a month to cut their hair. Imagine what that's like for the patients, for whom life is really tough. Maybe this is the highlight of their month, getting to have their hair cut and perhaps feel, normal, special on that day. So I think this is a really remarkable partnership on a small scale, well, actually achieving big things. It's remarkable because there's a brilliant fit between the charity and the company. It's also remarkable because there's a really senior person involved in Helen, so the senior relationship is important too. But I also think the third crucial point is that they're doing more than just raising money. They're actually totally embedded in the cause. They're totally involved. They go along to the hospice and they cut hair every month. Now, I think we are surrounded. It's a privilege to be here talking to so many amazing charities. These charities in this room today and outside this room have huge goals, eye-watering goals that we're trying to change. Jeremy talking about it this morning. I worked, at Alzheimer's Society with Jeremy, seeking to lead the fight against dementia, to find a cure for dementia. And cancer charities and, charities tackling Ebola in Africa at the moment. Our charities have huge goals, eye-watering goals. And actually, we can form partnerships with companies, like the hospice has formed a partnership with Francesco's hair group, that can enable us to help us achieve those goals. Because companies have huge resources to access. And actually, also, these partnerships can be hugely beneficial for both the company and the charity. Imagine what this relationship has done for Helen's profile in the area and with her target customers that also care for Catherine's House Hospice. But the tragedy is, and this is the thing that really got me motivated, and I guess when we experience hurt, when we experience pain, we take action. And I realised that actually there are tens of thousands of charities and tens of thousands of companies that are not really partnering at all. Or if they are partnering, they're partnering in a small way. And that's perhaps because charities and companies don't yet fully realise the potential. Or maybe because it's really expensive to invest in this area. Or perhaps they've had a bad experience in the past. Or nobody's inspired them enough to realise that the benefit far outweighs the cost. And indeed, actually, corporate fundraising only accounts for 6% of our total voluntary income in the UK. That is a small fraction, and yet there are many inspiring partnerships where charities and companies work together brilliantly. But I think this is a huge missed opportunity for the charity sector and a huge missed opportunity for the business sector. So I thought, somebody's got to do something about this. And I thought, well, if not me, then who?
So, we knew what we needed to do, but it was a case of when were we going to do this. So, all fired up, for me, the moment of when was this going to happen was almost yesterday. It needed to be immediate, it needed to be done then, but essentially it needed to be about seizing every single opportunity that was going to present itself. So shortly before the annual lectures last year, an amazing opportunity had presented itself. And when I said fundraising was going to be in the heart and in the core of everything the organisation did, I took it quite literally and I took it physically. It was going to be right in the middle, at the front entrance of the hospital. So an opportunity presented itself where the patient library that was on the front corridor of the hospital was moving, and there was a small opening there. Now, as I say, it had been seen as services should be at the front as you come in. That's what we should be talking about. And fundraising should be slightly just in the support in the background. And where fundraising actually used to be based was an office called the donation office. Now, you can probably see where I'm going here. Being called a donation office in a hospital wasn't the smartest of moves. So people kind of thought that was a place to give blood, or even we. So we changed that, and then this opportunity came along, and there was an opening. So I put to the board, I put to both boards, can we just trial, can we have a pop-up Christmas shop? Because it was around October, November time. And we tried it, and we literally only spent about £35 on some posters saying, let's do it. And it became a thriving hub of activity. Patients loved it, families loved it, staff really loved it. And so then, when I came to make my case of let's have something permanent, there was already something there to prove that this could work. And so originally, everyone thought it'll just be a shop. That's what we'll do. But, you know, it's stating the obvious. If we'd called it the shop, again, would we have really embedded fundraising right in the heart? So we created a fundraising hub. And the fundraising hub is half shop, but it's also a place where people can come in, speak to us, talk to us, the families drop in, we come up with ideas. It's a great place to be. Now, the donation office, as it was formerly known, used to get about 40 visitors a month. And those were people that had really committed to want to find us in the hospital. And they already knew and had phoned up, and they were merely coming to collect a bucket or something of that sort. The fundraising hub, I'm now proud to say, sees over 29,000 visitors a year and is ever growing. It is integral into all we do, and it is right at the heart of the hospital. So that was a moment of when, for me, I knew I had to do something. There was lots of conflicting demands at the time. We were going into our busiest season of Christmas, but it would have been mad not to have seized that opportunity. So, message to all, seize every opportunity that comes your way. So, what I knew, though, to fully get everyone to embrace the culture, there were going to be lots of moments of when. I couldn't literally just go up to people and insist that they did it there and then and that they got on board. For many, again, going back to the doctors and nurses, they wanted to be involved. They could see that the families were getting something out of it and the staff were getting something out of it. But the moments of when with others, I was going to have to be really patient, which is not always a great skill of mine, but I was going to have to be really patient and just pick those moments. A true moment of when was actually with my boss. Deputy Chief Executive, accountant by trade, used to be KPMG, not really a risk taker. And our Chief Executive went on maternity leave, and it meant that he needed to step up. And he had no qualms whatsoever in the running of the hospital. But the only thing that fazed him was the public speaking, being the face of the hospital, talking about the emotion and all of that. So obviously there was a solution to that problem. And fundraising could do that. We are the storytellers. We were the ones that wanted to go out and tell everyone how great that hospital was. And without him even knowing it, he became the ultimate champion of fundraising. Soon, for every single objective that the hospital had, fundraising became a part of that. So we were going to improve end-of-life care. Well, fundraising can do that. They can build a centre and so on. We were going to create better partnerships. We were going to create more awareness of ourselves in the region and the city. We were the ones that were constantly looking at the future. And that was the difference of what we were bringing to that organisation. We were the ones that were saying the why not and the whys, and we kept on saying we can make it better, and we would make it better. The time that I knew that the culture had really started to shift was actually when he put forward that there needed to be a director of fundraising on the hospital board. So finally, in that moment, fundraising had an equal voice. We had the Chief Officer of Medicine, we had the Chief Officer of Nursing, Workforce Operations, and then we had our Director of Fundraising. We became part of everything. We become part of every single plan. And it's not been easy, and there are still people that need a little bit more convincing. You can imagine that you have the report of medicine and you scrutinise every single weight, every single bed space, everything that went wrong, and then fundraising comes on with its 5 years plan. It's a different culture that needs shifting, but as I say, we are the ones that are making the organisation look at the best it can possibly be. And what I would say, that the lesson I've really learned along the way is just never put yourself in a position where you're going to get a no. So if you're going to no, it's much harder to get a yes. So along the way, I've got lots of little yeses. So one of those was and it sounds very simple and very obvious, but on all the wards and departments, we wanted to obviously have fundraising boards, and we wanted to make it specific for each ward so that anyone walking in knew the benefit of their donation to the area that they really cared about. Now, the obvious thing to do would have been to approach like the big 5 wards and departments. They had the biggest footfall, they had the most, emotional connections, probably you could say, and that would have been the obvious thing to do. But likewise, they would have completely controlled, dominated, conflicted, and we would have lost the core purpose of what we were trying to do. So we picked 10 very carefully small wards and departments who were unbelievably excited to get involved with this, and they became real fundraising champions. We did it, it was obvious to see the benefits. Then a ripple occurred, the next door neighbours, literally in wards, were then saying, we want to be involved, we did it, we did it, we did it. And what happened was the one ward that I always knew was going to be my problem, and from the very start, they came to me at the very end and said, why aren't we involved? We want to be involved, why have you ignored that? And without them even knowing, they created a willing yes. Now, if I'd gone to them in the first instance, they would have said no. But because we'd created this enthusiastic army of fundraising champions from every single ward, they joined in. And so for me, it's again about picking your moments of when. It's not all and now for everyone, but pick those moments. So in summary, we kind of said before, you might be the start of what needs to change. You might know what has to change, but think about all those other who's. Think about it cleverly and with a purpose of when the right whens are, and don't miss any of those opportunities. And just go out there and get all the small yeses, because they'll amount to the big one. Jonathan?
So a year ago, in this room, as Andy said, we were asked to write down what we wanted to change. So I wrote down that I want to inspire more of these world-changing partnerships, these life-changing partnerships between charities and companies. There aren't nearly enough, and it is a huge missed opportunity. And actually, so what I've done since then is I've then gone out and I've started to interview, and I've interviewed 10 leaders in charities and companies and spoken to them about what's the huge opportunity here for charities and companies, what are the big benefits, and actually what are the obstacles that get in their way, and how can we help charities and companies overcome them? How can we inspire them to create these partnerships, to create more of these partnerships? And also, how can we enable them too? So I've done these 10 interviews, and early in 2015, I'll be publishing a report, a qualitative report, revealing the findings of these really great interviews. For example, I've spoken to the Director of Fundraising of Prostate Cancer. I've spoken to Ken Burnett. I've spoken to many people, somebody who's leading one of the biggest small business revolutions in the world. So I've spoken to lots of really great people who have some great ideas about how we can inspire more charities and companies to partner. And I realise it's not all down to me, but I want to inspire others and encourage others to get involved too. So if you want to come along to that event, if you want to see that research, or if you want to work with me on this in some shape or form, then please come and see me throughout the rest of the day, including over lunch. This is the beginning of the work that I'm doing on it. This is the beginning of a journey. And actually what I've realised is I think this is an idea whose time has come. There's something about now that is a really important time for charities and companies. Ken Burnett describes corporate partnerships as one of the 3 biggest opportunities facing the charity sector today. We're scratching the surface of what is possible. Save the Children, Macmillan, and I know Macmillan are in the room today. Alzheimer's Society, they're creating amazing partnerships. But how about the rest of these fantastic causes? There are perfect corporate partners out there for you too. Now, the reason why I think this idea's time has arrived is because following the global financial crisis, public trust of companies is at an all-time low across many countries. In fact, public trust of companies in some countries is below 55%. And for business, we know that that is a huge problem, an absolute huge problem. And some businesses are actually waking up to the fact that really doing good and being good is really great for their business. So I'd like to introduce you to the second change maker of my presentation, which is Paul Polman. If you haven't heard of him, you are going to hear a lot more about him. Because this guy is an inspirational leader of the organisation that I started my career with, Unilever, but also interestingly that Phil Barden came from too. I would say that we worked together at Unilever, we did, but he was a very high-flying marketeer and I was a lowly sales executive selling pepperami, would you believe? Yeah? It's the spicy meat snack that's a good alternative to chocolate. So, gosh, that took me back for a moment then. And so Paul Polman is the chief executive of Unilever. And this guy is leading a revolution, not just at Unilever, but within other companies and in the corporate sector. Because Unilever are such an enormous organisation, so brilliant at marketing, that actually what they do is really affecting others and inspiring others. I mean, look at their logo. Can you remember the old Unilever logo? It used to be embossed like it was brass and it was really opulent and expensive. And now they've changed their logo to something that looks more like, well, our causes, all sort of glued together. And that's how they're running their business. Paul Polman has committed to his organisation cutting global emissions in half by 2020. They've also made a commitment to absolutely take out hunger in the UK, so nobody will be going hungry. And we've all seen the publicity around food banks in the UK. But I want to read you a quote by him, because I think how this guy is talking about business is about how we want business to talk in the charity sector. He said, in an interview he did the other day, he said, "We do not have to win at the expense of others to be successful. Winning alone is not enough. It's about winning with purpose. We do not have to win at the expense of others to be successful. Winning alone is not enough. It's about winning with purpose." He's changing things at Unilever. He's saying, let's not talk about people as consumers anymore. Let's talk about them as human beings who care about the world. He described Unilever the other day as the biggest NGO in the world. But he said, but because we make a profit, we're sustainable. This guy is thinking about business in a radically different way. He's responding to the protests that happen in Wall Street. He's responding to the change in the mood in the world and what consumers want. Consumers and the public want better behaviour from business. Now, this is an enormous opportunity for charities because companies want to have their purpose. Enlightened companies like Unilever realise that by having a purpose, by standing for something good, it's more motivating for employees, more motivating for shareholders, more motivating for the people that buy their products. This is a huge opportunity for charities because we can help these companies reveal their purpose to all those key audiences that I've spoken about. So that's why I am doing some work to really inspire more charities and companies to partner together. And like I say, I'll be launching this report and holding an event early next year. But that will be the beginning. And other people who want to get involved, please do come and talk to me. So really, in summary, I wanted to sum up, the change that we're making, the commitments that Louise and I made a year ago I think if I want to change something, there's really sort of three things I've got to do. First of all, I've got to have a positive mental attitude. I've got to believe that actually I can do something about it. And I think one of the stunning things about fundraisers is that we're surrounded by positive mental attitude. And maybe we are crazy enough to believe that we can do something about it. So first of all, I've got to have that positive mental attitude. Stuff's going to knock me back, yes, like Louise has said, but I'm going to keep going. Secondly, I'm going to get committed. So I'm going to make a commitment, like you guys are all today. So, if you want to make a commitment, write it down on your board, but also talk to somebody about it over lunch. Louise and I spoke to this whole auditorium, and you want to hear your voice coming back over a microphone and say, gosh, I'm committed. And the third thing, so on the second one, obviously what you've got to do then is be committed, is set yourself a big, hairy, audacious goal. One that makes your eyes water. One that scares the living daylights out of you, because that's why we're here. We're not here to make more money. We're here to change lives, make our lives more meaningful. And thirdly, it's to do what you're all doing, what we're all doing, which is about taking action. Go and make something happen. Because I decided that basically, if I don't do something about this now, then when? So what I encourage you to do today, over lunch, on your blackboards, write down the challenge, the thing that you want to change. What do you want to change in your organisation, in your team, in the world, in your country, whatever it may be? And then set yourself a deadline about when you're going to start doing something about it. And I really encourage you to have those conversations over lunch throughout the day, because then you'll not only be taking great insight and inspiration from this event, but you'll also be taking action away too. Thank you.